The bronze sword represents a historic marvel of technology for China. Unfortunately, however, sword-making know-how was lost to China long ago. I feel obligated to try to make a bronze sword by myself.
Yue Zhuo Shu is a fantastic book full of mystery from the ancient times. The Yue state sword-making master Oye Zi was said to have made 5 precious swords: Zhanlu, Chunjun, Shengxie, Yuchang, and Zhuque for the king of Yue in this book. These 5 swords made their mark in the Warring States period as incarnations of ghosts. However, after the Qin dissolved the Six States in 221 AD, advances in technology meant bronze weaponry was soon totally replaced with iron weaponry. This transition took place in the state of Yue 2,500 years ago, the territory of which largely overlaps present-day Shaoxing city of Zhejiang. The following words still resonate with meaning in Shaoxing.
The patterns glitter like moving stars. The luster springs forth like flashing water. The blade tenses like a towering cliff. The material shines like melting ice.
It won't work. It's not hot enough. It won't melt.
Zhu Liyao, director of the casting culture committee of the Yue Shaoxing, is a pushy yet prudent man. Over the past few decades, Zhu has kept on pursuing his research into a particular Gojian bronze sword. Now he has gained some recognition.
The sword imitates the actual size of the sword of Gojian. This is my maiden work. I used to think the pattern on this sword was exactly what was recorded as moving stars in Yuejushu. Now I realize they're definitely not the same thing. Totally different.
This sword was made by Zhu Liyao 2 years ago in imitation of the shape and pattern of the sword of Gojian. In the winter of 1965, a bronze sword inscribed with the Chinese characters Yue Wang Gojian and Zizuo Yongjian was unearthed during the excavation of the Wangshan Chu tombs near Jingzhou City, Hubei Province. 2,000 years was apparently not long enough to rust this sword. It's an extremely sharp weapon made with cutting-edge craftsmanship, sculpted as though it were not created by human hands.
It's only 66 centimeters long, just 66 centimeters. It will be around 50 centimeters long when finished, right? More than 70 centimeters. The rough sword is over 60 centimeters long. A sword needs to be at least 70 centimeters long. The blade itself takes up much of the length at 60 centimeters. The remaining part is for the handle.
The blade of the sword of Gojian is only 55.6 centimeters long. Evidence suggests that due to technological limits, bronze swords of that era could only reach 60 centimeters at most. When Zhu Liyao first attempted to resurrect the bronze sword, his skills only enabled him to complete half the length of the sword.
This one stops at 30 centimeters, 30 centimeters or 40 centimeters, so when it comes to casting, 30 centimeters is a critical point. When touching it, it should feel like touching a glass plate.
Dong Ya-wei is a bronzeware expert at the Ezhou Museum of Hubei. Back in 2009, he was the first person Zhu Liyao sought out for advice when he began remaking the bronze sword.
He told me he wanted to cast the bronze sword of the Yue. Based on the practices we followed at that time, I suggested he use an iron mold.
There were 4 molds used to cast bronze utensils in ancient times: sand mold, clay mold, pottery mold, and metal mold. The mold Dong Ya-wei used to cast his bronze mirror was pottery mold. However, according to Dong Ya-wei, the first 3 molds are suitable only for making everyday utensils or sacrificial bronzeware. The only remaining choice for bronze weaponry is rigid and tenacious metal mold. Zhu Liyao had 2 decisions to make on his trip to Ezhou: whether to cast a normal bronze sword with a metal mold or to cast a bronze sword with a high tin content. In normal bronzeware, tin content is less than 10%, while high tin content means tin content can be as high as 20%. This proportionately high tin content is mainly used to increase the rigidity of the bronze sword. At that point, Zhu Liyao was still but an armchair strategist with no practical experience.
This is the pouring gate. Technically speaking, it's a pressurized cylinder. This is the metal mold we are talking about. How long can you manage now? This mold is 90 centimeters long. At my current skill level, I can do more than 1 meter.
But back in 2009, Zhu Liyao hadn't the slightest idea where to start. So he asked an expert to design his first metal mold. This man is Liu Changming, a metallic material engineer at the Ningbo Military and Industrial Institute. The mold was designed soon after.
At that time, I didn't yet realize sword casting was hard work. I was blindly excited every day. Liu Changming said whether the alloy solution could reach the end concerned him most. Mr. Zhu wants high tin content, but high tin content will cause firing problems.
The melting point for copper can be as high as 1083 degrees, while tin melts at 230 degrees. Low tin alloys with less than 10% of tin can still allow furnace temperatures to reach around 1000 degrees. However, once tin content exceeds 10%, temperatures in the furnace have to be reduced to below 1000 degrees. Obviously, a lower temperature will decrease the active properties of the alloy solution and boost the forming of oxidizing slag. The direct result will be
every time the solution would stop halfway. Even with the help of Liu Changming, the work didn't get any better. Too many attempts at this. Hundreds, thousands.
Despite several months of experimentation and thousands of failures, Zhu Liyao didn't manage to complete a whole sword. It was quite unbelievable. 2011 was a hard year for Zhu Liyao. He inquired desperately after a person who could help him with his project. Finally, he encountered 84-year-old famous casting expert Jin Zongqing.
When we first talked, I got the feeling things were going to be different. I'm going to succeed, with the help of this capable man.
Experience really counts. Mr. Jin figured out the problem soon enough.
Without sufficient theoretical background, one simply fumbles around in the dark, reinventing the wheel. That will not work. The solution has to stop where it has to stop.
Actually, by pouring metallic solution, you're not pouring water. The temperature of the alloy solution can reach 1000 degrees. Once poured into the mold, the solution reacts with the air and cools down very quickly with oxidizing slag forming. The faster the pouring speed, the more oxidizing slag will be formed. Liquidity will become worse accordingly.
Mr. Jin succeeded with his first attempt. The solution reached the end of the mold. I was cheered up by this.
Actually, this is but an accidental success.
We didn't expect the second pouring to fail. We spent a whole day trying to figure out the problem to no avail. That day impressed me a lot.
After that, no matter what new approaches Mr. Jin and Liu Changming tried, the result refused to change. Failure became the theme for the next few months.
Having witnessed too much failure, one day at dinner time, Mr. Jin burst out. He said I was crazy because I dreamt of making a bronze sword with a metal mold. This was so whimsical. He couldn't believe he had joined me in doing this crazy thing. As an 84-year-old man, he should have been wiser. At that juncture, I was also irritated. I answered back by saying, "You are absolutely as good as your reputation." He was offended immediately.
Mr. Jin left, but their little problem remained unsolved. Those defective swords kept bothering Zhu Liyao. It was in 2009 that Zhu Liyao came up with the idea to replicate the bronze sword. That year, a sword was displayed at the Shaoxing Museum. It was said to have been used by the father of Goujian, Yun Chang.
I didn't expect that visit would change my life to such a great extent.
Humans first encountered bronze 6,000 years ago. Chinese bronzeware peaked 2,500 years ago and was representative of the highest level of science and technology available at that time. The bronze sword was precisely a symbol of this technological strength. Zhu Liyao's long restrained ambition revealed itself during that visit.
So at that time, I wondered, can I really replicate the bronze sword?
At that moment, Zhu Liyao decided to replicate the bronze sword. For his family, though, this was an uncomfortable decision.
I thought that it was an ill-considered position. He had his business in Shanghai, and he wanted to just give it up.
When I got back home, I told my wife I was going to quit my business in Shanghai and return to Shaoxing to replicate the sword.
Quarreling didn't make things any better. He was so determined, I ended up just leaving him be.
To be frank, I am a stubborn man. I will do what you don't want me to do.
Zhu Liyao sacrificed a lot in his attempts. Even with the help of so many experienced experts, he just failed over and over again. He was not immune to the idea of giving up either. Mr. Jin left one piece of advice upon leaving. He suggested trying a sand mold. This advice kindled a small glimmer of hope for Zhu Liyao. He recalled that sand molds have long existed, so he designed a traditional sand mold without hesitation.
This is a sand mold. This is the casting riser. When solution is poured in, it will flow to the sword mold on both sides under pressure. Fit these parts together. This means a low tin content. Theoretically, it should be How is this sword, Ju? It looks good. It's got a crystalline surface. Let's do a test of its tenaciousness and rigidity. It's more than 60 centimeters. I'll demonstrate its tenacity. It's fairly good. Let's do a test. I need every rough sword to be like this. All of them need a good amount of tenacity and a good amount of rigidity.
Hardness and softness together make for a perfect bronze sword.
I successfully completed this metal mold. So I have to keep it safe and sound. I spent lots of time on it. A whole year. Look at this sword. It's from the first batch we made with the metal mold. How do you like it? It's good. Pretty good. Take a good look. See if you notice anything. There's no pattern. Correct.
The success of the metal mold was by no means the end for Zhu Liyao. In early 2012, right after he completed his patentless bronze sword, the Intangible Cultural Heritage Museum of Shaoxing City was constructed and was eager to prepare its opening exhibition. They found Zhu Liyao and he presented them with two swords, his patentless bronze sword and another one which imitated the sword of Gojian.
He said he was going to cast another two swords to replace the first two. At that time, I was busy arranging the exhibition. I didn't really take his words to heart. Authentic bronze swords should have patterns. The patterns are supposed to form naturally during the casting instead of being created artificially. This is a brief comment on the book Yuejue Shu. The patterns glitter like moving stars. The luster springs forth like flashing water. The blade tenses like a towering cliff. The material shines like melting ice.
The blade of the sword of Gojian is wrapped in a black checkered pattern. Some people hold that this pattern is exactly what is described in Yuejue Shu. As always, people disagree on this matter, so the riddle of the pattern described in Yuejue Shu remains unsolved. On August the 19th, 1974, a violent typhoon made direct landfall at Sanmen Bay, Zhejiang province. The ensuing floods brought underground buried materials to the surface. When the floods receded, strange things were left in their wake.
My father drained the water in the field after the floods. A few days later, he went to hoe the field. Suddenly, the hoe hit against something hard. My father picked up the hard material and recognized it as a piece of copper. My father was familiar with metal materials because our family ancestors used to make bronze statues and tin statues.
This is actually an incomplete bronze sword. Perhaps it broke apart during the fierce flooding.
So my father brought it home.
Looking back now, that period was the happiest time of Zhu Liao's life.
On one occasion, I took this knife-like sword to the river and proceeded to grind it. I was so impressed that as I grinded, a type of pattern suddenly came into my eyes. The surface of the sword had been ground smooth. The patterns gleamed in the sunshine like fish scales.
However, this is but a memory Zhu Liao would question again and again in later days.
I'm sure of what I saw, but this pattern hasn't appeared in any of my works. I began doubting my memory. Am I making this up?
The sword then became Zhu Liao's favored toy, but to support their expenses, his father had to melt the sword down and sell it for copper.
At that time, my father was particularly strict with me. I didn't dare say I wanted the sword back, so I went outside and wept alone. I told myself then that I must make one of my own when I grow up.
Who would have thought that an oath sworn by an innocent child beside a river could possibly still be a motivating force 30 years later? Zhu Liao had seen through countless failures to get where he was in 2012. When he tried to decipher the meaning of those poetic lines from the Yuezhe Shu again, he got a full new vision.
In Yuezhe Shu, there is a person who is asked to judge the 5 precious swords made for the king of Yue. This person is like the equivalent of a modern-day weapons inspector. Perhaps when he described the swords as like moving stars, towering cliff, and melting ice, he might have been conveying technical terms instead of mere adjectives. Maybe they represent certain technical standards. From this point of view, I'm quite sure that the ancient swords had patterns.
This means the pattern on the bronze sword is a natural byproduct of being made from bronze tin alloy.
I sawed off several of the antique swords I had collected, grinded them, and studied them carefully. As I grinded them, I found the pattern described in Yuezhe Shu. They all had the ground to cry. I made it. All the time and effort I poured into this, it's all become worth it.
During this time, the Intangible Cultural Heritage Museum of Shaoxing City officially opened.
That day, in the early morning, he hurried to the museum with his new work. He informed me later that he had replaced the previous two. Later on, I looked over the sword carefully. It exactly evoked the feeling of overflowing quiet water. That is how the sword, Chunjun, is described in Yuejueshu.
Oye Ze, the Chinese blacksmith hero from the state of Yue, left 5 bronze swords to history. Jianlu, Chunjun, Xiangxie, Yuchang, and Zhuque. They enjoy worldwide fame, yet they exist only in legend. Nobody had ever seen them until they were replicated in Shaoxing City in 2012. "2,500 years ago, bronze swords were respected not for their ornate patterns, but instead their usefulness as a weapon of war. Zhu Liao, in agreement with this philosophy, not only wants to exhibit brilliant, dazzling patterns, but also wants to return to life the martial quality of the sword. Sharpness, tenacity, and destructive power is what Zhu Liao pursues. High tin alloys can guarantee sufficient hardness. Only with this hardness can the bronze sword be ground into a sword with maximum sharpness. Bamboo is a member of the grass family. Bamboo fibers have excellent elasticity and low density. In terms of their strength, they're 3 to 4 times stronger than steel. Their incredible tensile strength and durability has made them a trusted material for testing the tenacity of a bronze sword. Water is soft in nature, plastic bottles are hard in nature. So a bottle filled with water is a combination of softness and hardness. Thus, the overall destructive power of a bronze sword can be tested with it. This is not only an astonishingly beautiful man-made creation, unparalleled in nature, its depth also goes beyond the surface and reaches to the core. What Zhu Liao has revived is the brilliant wisdom of our ancestors, their consummate craftsmanship, high spirituality, and a sense of devotion now reintroduced into the modern world.